This video is based on publicly available news reports, insider accounts, media coverage, and ongoing developments sourced from ESPN, NFL Network, NFL.com, Bleacher Report, CBS Sports, Fox News, NBC Sports, and other major outlets. All quotes and statistics referenced are drawn from verified published reports. Some details surrounding ongoing situations may evolve as the 2026 NFL season progresses. This channel does not claim insider access and presents this story for informational and entertainment purposes only. Information is accurate as of the time of production. They said he was done. They said Pittsburgh was just a farewell tour. They said Aaron Rodgers was coasting into retirement on a cushy paycheck and a goodbye wave. And then, somehow, someway, everything flipped again. Because with Aaron Rodgers, nothing is ever simple. Nothing is ever clean. And nothing, absolutely nothing, ever goes according to plan. Right now, the Pittsburgh Steelers are standing at the edge of the most complicated, the most pressure-packed, the most historically significant quarterback situation this franchise has ever navigated. And the questions? They are not going away. If this story already has your jaw on the floor, hit that subscribe button right now because we cover the biggest stories in sports every single week, and you do not want to miss what's coming next. Now let's go back, way back, and trace exactly how we got here. Because to understand the magnitude of what's happening with Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2026, you have to understand the years of chaos, brilliance, agony, and pure theater that brought us to this moment. This isn't just a football story. This is a saga about legacy, ego, loyalty, aging, and one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history refusing, absolutely refusing, to leave quietly. Cast your mind back to the early months of 2025. Aaron Rodgers, still technically a New York Jet, was an unrestricted free agent with almost nowhere to go. He appeared on the Pat McAfee Show and delivered one of the most perfectly Rodgers lines you will ever hear from a professional athlete. "I'm open to everything and attached to nothing," he said. For Steelers fans who desperately wanted clarity, those 7 words were like nails on a chalkboard. The Steelers had been pursuing Rodgers for months. They needed a quarterback. Rodgers needed a team. It should have been simple. It was not. NFL Network insider Ian Rappaport said on Good Morning Football that there was a lot of positive momentum between Rodgers and Pittsburgh, and that it seemed like the Steelers were the most likely place by far, but Rodgers just hadn't come out and said it yet. Meanwhile, retirement remained on the table. The specter of him just walking away hung over everything. Sports Illustrated Steelers owner Art Rooney II, coach Mike Tomlin, and GM Omar Khan all said the same thing publicly. They loved Rodgers, they wanted him, and they were being patient. But privately, inside that organization, you better believe the clock was ticking. Sports Illustrated, at one point, Rooney told the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette that he expected Rodgers to make a decision before the NFL draft, which started April 24th. Rodgers himself had apparently told Khan and Rooney that he wouldn't drag things out as long as he did the year before. "I'm not 100% sure what that means," Rooney said, clearly trying his best to stay diplomatic while the franchise sat frozen in limbo. The draft came and went. No decision. The league moved forward. Other quarterbacks got signed, traded, drafted, and Aaron Rodgers just waited, thinking, processing, going through a lot in his personal life, as he had said. The football world watched and waited, fans argued, analysts debated, and Pittsburgh sat there with no clear plan B. Then, in June 2025, right before minicamp, the dam finally broke. Rodgers signed a 1-year deal worth $13.65 million with the Steelers, reaching the decision after several months of contemplation. And almost immediately, he went on the Pat McAfee Show and delivered a bombshell. "Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is it," Rodgers said. "That's why we just did a 1-year deal. Steelers didn't need to put any extra years on that or anything. This was really about finishing with a lot of love and fun and peace for the career that I've had." ESPN, so there it was. The farewell tour was officially on. Pittsburgh was supposed to be the last dance, the goodbye song, the victory lap. And for much of the 2025 season, it played out more or less that way. Rodgers went 10-6 in 16 starts that season, missing 1 game due to a fractured wrist he suffered in a win against the Cincinnati Bengals in Week 11. Despite the injury, he finished the year completing 65.7% of his passes with 24 touchdowns and just 7 interceptions. Not spectacular by the standard of his Green Bay prime, but serviceable, respectable. enough to win a division title. ESPN: the Steelers' offense that year leaned heavily on quick passes and getting the ball to playmakers after the catch. Rodgers' receivers averaged 6.5 yards after catch per completion, the highest mark of his entire career. It was a simplified, efficient system built around protecting an aging quarterback who could no longer consistently escape pressure the way he once did. ESPN: the Stats told the full story. His 3,322 passing yards were a career low outside of injury-shortened seasons. He completed only 39.3% of his attempts under pressure, per next-gen stats. And he targeted players below 10 air yards on 71.5% of his attempts, the highest rate of any quarterback over the previous 3 seasons. This was not the gunslinging Aaron Rodgers of Lambeau Field lore. This was a smarter, more conservative, more limited version, and Pittsburgh was fine with that because it was working. NFL late in the season, Rodgers authored several remarkable wins. In a must-win game against the Detroit Lions in Week 17, he completed 65.9% of his attempts for 266 yards and a touchdown. Then, in the Week 18 win against the Baltimore Ravens that clinched the AFC North title, he threw for a season-high 294 yards. Pittsburgh was in the playoffs. The farewell tour was heading to the postseason. Everything seemed to be going to script. ESPN, and then came Monday night, January 12, 2026, wildcard weekend. The Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Houston Texans. And what unfolded at Acrisure Stadium that night was not a graceful goodbye. It was a brutal, ugly, lopsided destruction. The Steelers fell to the Texans 30-6 in a game that was never close. Rodgers, under constant pressure all night, completed just 17 of 33 passes for 146 yards, threw no touchdowns, and was sacked 4 times for a loss of 36 yards. The moment that truly broke the game open came in the fourth quarter, when the pocket collapsed on Rodgers on a 3rd and 12. A pair of Texans linemen converged on him, causing a fumble, which Sheldon Rankins scooped up and returned 33 yards for a touchdown. It added up to Pittsburgh's NFL record 5th consecutive playoff loss by double-digit points. The Texans also became the first team since the Chicago Bears' 73-0 win over Washington in 1940 to score multiple defensive touchdowns and allow 0 points in a playoff game against Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers. In the post-game press conference, Rodgers was asked immediately about his future. He walked out of the conference after defending Tomlin from critics. "I'm not going to make any emotional decisions," Rodgers said. "I'm going to get away and have the right conversations." When pressed about whether Pittsburgh would be his destination if he did return, he shut it down. "I'm not going to talk about that." Fox Sports broadcaster Troy Aikman, watching from the booth that night, delivered a verdict that echoed across the entire league. "I think we are watching Aaron Rodgers' last game," Aikman said. "He might be willing to come in at some point if a team needs a quarterback. I doubt that will happen. I don't imagine he's going to say he wants to come back and sign with the Steelers again or with another team." That was the conventional wisdom coming out of that wild card disaster. Rodgers was done. Pittsburgh needed to rebuild. Time to move on. But then January became February. February became March. And the Steelers made a move that nobody could have seen coming. A move that would change everything. Reignite the Rodgers speculation, and plunge this franchise back into the same swirling uncertainty it thought it had finally escaped. Mike Tomlin, the man who had coached the Steelers for 19 seasons and was the longest-tenured head coach in the entire NFL, stepped down following the wild card loss, and the Steelers turned around and hired Mike McCarthy, the man who had coached Aaron Rodgers for 13 seasons in Green Bay, the man who had celebrated a Super Bowl championship with him, and the man whose relationship with Rodgers had famously, bitterly deteriorated across their final years together in Wisconsin. Bleacher Report. The moment that hiring was announced, the football world had one collective thought. Is this for Rodgers? The Steelers had hired McCarthy and added several assistants with ties to Rodgers' past. That move immediately raised eyebrows. Bringing back familiar voices suggested the possibility that Rodgers could be preparing for one more run, this time reunited with a coach who understood how he operated at the line of scrimmage. But wait, not everyone was celebrating this reunion. Not by a long shot. NFL journalist Tyler Dunn appeared on 93.7 The Fan in Pittsburgh and revealed that one of his sources, described as familiar with both Rodgers and McCarthy, warned bluntly that the two would be at each other's throats and fighting in no time. The Relationship between McCarthy and Rodgers had reportedly soured badly across their final seasons together in Green Bay from 6 through 2018. This is the part of the story that the Steelers organization desperately does not want to talk about publicly. The history between these two men is complicated in a way that goes far beyond the normal friction between a head coach and his star quarterback. In Green Bay, there were seasons where their communication reportedly broke down so severely that it affected the entire offense. There were reports of creative disagreements, of Rodgers feeling constrained by McCarthy's system, of McCarthy feeling undermined by Rodgers' ego and influence in the locker room. By the time McCarthy was fired by the Packers in December 2018, the relationship was described by people inside that building as completely fractured. Even former Steelers star Le'Veon Bell publicly criticized the McCarthy hire, making his skepticism clear about Pittsburgh's decision to bring in a coach with that kind of complicated history. Pro Football Talk's Mike Florio also sounded the alarm on his show. That uniform goes a long way to covering up actual or perceived dysfunction, Florio warned, suggesting that with Tomlin gone, hidden dysfunction within the Steelers organization could finally come to light. Tomlin, for all his flaws, was a master at projecting unity and keeping internal conflict invisible. McCarthy, with a messier track record, might not be able to pull off the same trick. And yet, and this is the twist that makes this story so addictive, none of it stopped Aaron Rodgers. Because Rodgers, in typical Rodgers fashion, looked at all of this chaos, looked at all of these red flags, looked at an aging body and a brutal playoff performance, and a new head coach he'd reportedly fought with for years, and said, "You know what? I'm in." He told reporters that prior to McCarthy's hiring, he had essentially written off his Steelers career after learning of Tomlin's departure. "I love Mike T. I really appreciate the opportunity to come in last year," Rodgers said. "I thought that was probably it for me in Pittsburgh. But when the decision was made to hire Mike, that sort of opened my mind to coming back. It was surreal, like there was a full circle aspect to reuniting with McCarthy that piqued my interest from the start." He admitted there was some doubt about returning, and that he hadn't made his final decision until after the 2026 NFL draft wrapped up in late April. He spoke with McCarthy, with Khan, and with his wife before pulling the trigger. And then, several weeks after most people had assumed the story was over, Aaron Rodgers returned to Pittsburgh on a one-year deal reportedly worth up to $25 million, with $22 million guaranteed, nearly double what he made in his first season with the Steelers. The Steelers announced the signing and noted that Rodgers, who originally joined the team as an unrestricted free agent in 2025, was back for his second season in black and gold. In 21 NFL seasons, he had appeared in 264 games, starting 257, completing 5,696 of 8,743 passes for 66,274 yards and 527 touchdowns. Pittsburgh, and this time, unlike last year when he hedged and said he was pretty sure it was his final season, Rodgers made it crystal clear. When asked directly whether 2026 would be his last season, Rodgers answered, "Yes." Then he added, "This is it." At 42 years old, turning 43 in December, Rodgers would be the oldest player in the entire NFL for what he confirmed would be his 22nd and final season. Statistically, the stakes are enormous. Rodgers sits fifth all-time in passing yards, needing just 5,564 more to pass Brett Favre for fourth. He is fifth all-time in completions, 429 behind Favre for fourth place. And he is fourth all-time in passing touchdowns, sitting just 12 behind Peyton Manning for third. A strong final season would cement his place not just as a great quarterback, but as arguably the most efficient passer in NFL history. A weak one could complicate the legacy. NBC New York NFL Network insider Tom Pelissero went on The Rich Eisen show and suggested Rodgers was sending a deliberate message to his teammates when he publicly confirmed his retirement plans. "Aaron Rodgers never says anything accidentally," Pelissero said. Whether it was to inspire the locker room, put pressure on the organization, or signal his commitment to winning in this final chapter, the message was calculated. At off-season workouts in late May, Rodgers was direct about why he came back. "I think we were close last year," he told reporters on May 20th. "We added some good pieces. I felt like we needed a lineman probably at some point. I thought we needed somebody who could work in the slot. And the Steelers have indeed been busy. They acquired wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr. via trade and signed running back Rico Dowdle. Pittsburgh also drafted offensive linemen in the first and third rounds of the 2026 draft, selecting tackle Maxi Heinekor with a first-round pick and guard Gennings Dunker in the third round, directly addressing one of the biggest weaknesses that made Rodgers' life miserable in that playoff loss to Houston. But here's the thing that nobody inside One North Shore Drive wants to say out loud. Here's the uncomfortable truth lurking beneath all of the optimism and the new weapons and the reunion storylines. The Pittsburgh Steelers have not won a playoff game in a decade. They entered the 2026 postseason on a 6-game playoff losing streak and had lost 5 of those 6 games by double digits. In the first quarter alone of those playoff games, opponents had outscored Pittsburgh 73-0. That is not a statistic. That is a sickness. That is a pattern so deeply embedded in this franchise's recent DNA that no single quarterback, no single coaching hire, and no single offseason acquisition has been able to fix it. Pittsburgh has now put itself on a 1-season clock with no safety net. A 1-year contract creates pressure by itself. A confirmed final season sharpens that pressure to a razor's edge. This is no longer just another veteran quarterback bridge situation. This is a last dance season for a franchise that has no reason to treat the year as anything other than now or never. Yes, this is it, Rodgers said. Pittsburgh cannot hide behind patience or process when its starting quarterback situation is built around a player approaching the literal end of his career. And then there is the elephant in the room, the Rodgers and McCarthy relationship, which sources have already warned could combust. NFL insider Tyler Dunn's source said those two will be at each other's throats and fighting in no time. The relationship between the coach and quarterback reportedly soured deeply across the final years of their Green Bay partnership. The comments immediately raised questions about whether this second partnership in Pittsburgh would run smoothly or if the same issues could resurface at the worst possible time. Analyst Nate Tice of Yahoo Sports and NFL Network tried to put a positive spin on it, defending McCarthy's reputation as a play caller. McCarthy has actually gotten, I don't want to say underrated, but he's actually a better play caller and a play designer than maybe he gets credit for, Tice said. He argued that if Rodgers is under center in 2026, McCarthy's West Coast system with its emphasis on quick passing routes would actually suit the aging quarterback well, giving him more freedom to do smoke routes, quick reads, and decisions. Maybe. But that analysis requires everything to go right. It requires chemistry between two men with a documented history of dysfunction. It requires an offensive line that has been rebuilt on the fly with 2 rookies. It requires wide receivers who are relatively new to the system to get up to speed immediately. It requires a 43-year-old quarterback, playing on what he says is his final contract in his final season, to somehow summon the focus, the physicality, and the resilience to carry this team further in the playoffs than it has gone in 10 years. Even ESPN analyst Dan Graziano, in a piece breaking down the wildcard loss to Houston, was blunt. The Aaron Rodgers hive would have you believe that the 42-year-old future Hall of Famer elevated this offense, but he really didn't. Graziano went so far as to say it won't matter who the Steelers coach is until they get a real quarterback. That was written after the 2025 season. Now Rodgers is back for 2026, and those words hang over everything. The Steelers do have a succession plan waiting in the wings. Drew Aller, the 2026 third-round draft pick, is on the roster, along with 2025 rookie Will Howard and longtime backup Mason Rudolph. McCarthy will have to develop these younger quarterbacks in the background while navigating Rodgers in the foreground. For 2026, though, it is full speed ahead with Rodgers, Pittsburgh's first year with a new head coach since 2007. The sheer weight of history makes this season almost impossible to fully comprehend. Mike McCarthy coaching Aaron Rodgers one final time in Pittsburgh, the very city where those two won a Super Bowl against the Steelers back in 2011. Now they are trying to win one for the Steelers. 15 years later, the sheer weight of history makes this season almost impossible to fully comprehend. Mike McCarthy coaching Aaron Rodgers one final time in Pittsburgh, the very city where those two won a Super Bowl against the Steelers back in 2011. Now they are trying to win one for the Steelers. 15 years later, with the clock at midnight and the room starting to go dark. If Rodgers plays well and the Steelers win, this decision will look bold, even visionary. If the season stalls, it will look like a short-term swing that delayed the next quarterback answer by another year and squandered whatever foundation they could have been building with a younger option. There is no middle ground here. There is no moral victory available to this franchise at this point. Not with Aaron Rodgers confirmed as playing his final NFL season. Not with a fan base that has been starving for real playoff success for a decade. Not with a new head coach carrying both the baggage of a complicated relationship with his quarterback and the pressure of replacing a legend in Mike Tomlin. Every single week of the 2026 NFL season, every snap, every game, every decision Mike McCarthy makes, every throw Aaron Rodgers launches into the Pittsburgh sky, all of it will be judged against the singular, brutal question: is this finally enough? The Steelers have been asking that question for 10 years. And somehow, impossibly, improbably, absurdly, Aaron Rodgers is still the man they're counting on to answer it. This is the last ride. The real last ride. And whether it ends in glory or in another crushing postseason exit, one thing is absolutely certain. Nobody in professional football does drama quite like Aaron Rodgers. And nobody does complicated quite like the Pittsburgh Steelers. Together in 2026, they are either going to give us the greatest football story of the decade or the most heartbreaking one. Either way, we will all be watching.